Welcome back. Going back to our lead story, Moscow has announced they will expel 150 diplomats, including 60 Americans, and close the U.S. consulate in St Petersburg in retaliation for Western expulsions of Russian diplomats over the spy poisoning saga in Britain. For more on this developing story, we are joined live from Moscow in Russia by our correspondent Lucy Taylor. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us. Now, do we know what the latest is regarding these expulsions?
Yes, well, the latest is this is the moment when Russia hits back. We heard from the Foreign Ministry that the US ambassador was summoned to speak to the Deputy Foreign Minister tonight. He was told that 60 diplomats will be expelled, 58 based here in Moscow and 2 from a different city. There will also be the closure of a consulate in St Petersburg. And separate to that, we also heard from the Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, who said that we should expect reciprocal measures for all the countries which have expelled Russian diplomats. Now, this is more or less what we expected ever since that extraordinary hour on Monday afternoon where one after another these announcements came in of different countries saying that they would expel Russian diplomats. And since then there have been more as well, even as recently as today, different countries joining this extraordinary coordinated campaign, which we believe is the biggest mass expulsion of diplomats in history. But now we know for sure, it seems, from the Foreign Minister himself, that Russia will at least mirror the measures that have been taken against them, and he said possibly worse.
Now, Lucy, this is a very big coordinated move. How are ordinary Russians taking the latest standoff?
Well, I think this was the moment when ordinary Russians started to wake up and really listen to this news. This row with the UK in particular has been bumbling along since the start of March, really. It's been weeks of diplomatic relations worsening. It started, of course, when that attack happened on the former spy and his daughter in the UK, and shortly afterwards the British Prime Minister came out and said that she believed and the UK believed that Russia was highly likely to be behind that attack. And ever since then, this has been in the news here, but there have been other stories which have been dominating the headlines, not least the presidential election, which gave Vladimir Putin another 6 years in power. So for many ordinary Russians, that's been the biggest story of the last few weeks. And then this week there was another terrible fire which killed 64 people in a city in Russia. But when this happened on Monday, that all of these countries began to expel Russian diplomats, that was the moment when people really started to notice. And there is a feeling among many people that there is hostility towards Russia from these other countries, and people are starting to feel a little bit concerned about what that might mean as in the coming weeks, in the coming days.
Now, Russia has always pointed a finger at the United Kingdom over this poisoning. Is Moscow still sticking to its guns with regards to this?
It is, and we also heard again today from the Foreign Ministry, before these latest expulsions were announced, a few hours before, was the briefing from the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, who's called Maria Zakharova. And this was also a fairly extraordinary event. She spoke for almost 3 hours, and most of that speech was about the situation with the UK. The speech was very much directed towards the UK. She complained that there had been very little information. She said the UK had been silent on the details of the investigation, the condition of the Russian citizens. They complained perhaps that the UK might be breaking international law by not allowing Russia access to its citizen, Yulia Skripal, the former spy's daughter, who was attacked. Of course, the UK says that Russia was behind that attack, and it doesn't want to reveal too many details. But yes, we've heard again from Russia today, and they are still very much sticking to the line that they had nothing to do with this story, and perhaps even the UK might be trying to frame Russia as some sort of anti-Russia campaign.
Now, British police indicated about a week ago that a high concentration of the nerve gas in the attack was found in the vicinity of Mr. Skripal's house in the UK. Why is the UK, what's the speculation with regards to the UK not wanting Russia to be giving access to Skripal's daughter with regards to the attack? Why exactly, have they given their reasons as to why they don't want Russia to communicate or to be in contact with Skripal's daughter?
Well, I think very simply the UK is saying that Russia is behind this attack because of the nerve agent that was used, which was a highly specialised military-grade substance, we're told. Russia says that it doesn't have any stocks of this. It says that all of its Soviet-made chemical weapons have been destroyed. So it says it's not behind this. But the UK is very concerned and says that Russia must have had some involvement in this. I think they're perhaps concerned for the safety of Yulia Skripal. We did hear today, though, from British doctors that her condition has improved. She has been in a critical condition in hospital, as has her father, for all of this time since the attack happened. But today we're told that her condition has improved slightly. She's making good progress, and they updated her condition from critical to stable.
Now, UN Chief Antonio Guterres has given warning of a Cold War-like tensions. Can we expect such tension looking at the Kremlin's response to the diplomatic standoff? 150 expulsions, 60 of which are Americans. This is a very huge number. Are we likely, now the UN chief is worried. Should the rest of the world be worried?
Well, it's difficult to say. It's certainly a significant cooling of relations, perhaps unprecedented, for all of this to happen at once. Within a week, as you say, more than 150 Russian diplomats will be returning home, and it seems as though this same number from Moscow returning to their respective countries as well. So this is very much a deterioration in relations, which many people do feel concerned about. I suppose the big question is whether this continues escalate. It was hinted by the foreign minister today that Russia would consider making non-reciprocal retaliation, so not just expelling the same number of diplomats as have been expelled from other countries, but perhaps also taking other measures in some way to punish or to react to these other countries. Excuse me.
Now, Lucy,
so whether this escalates, whether this ups the antes from that is the big question about whether this gets worse.
Listening to politicians in Moscow, do you think that this will end in the standoff, or might Russia, as you mentioned, the fact that they might use other means in terms of dealing with this problem? What does it mean going forward with regards to Russia being one of the big powers globally? What does this do for a lot of plans, a lot of alliances in terms of going forward with regards to the rest of the world and America, for instance, one of the biggest powers?
Yes, well, as you say, it very much depends. Excuse me. It very much depends what measures Russia chooses to take against these other countries. For example, the precedent with the UK, when the UK expelled Russian diplomats slightly earlier than all these other countries, Russia chose not just to expel the same number of diplomats, but also to close the British Council, which is a cultural exchange programme that Britain runs here in Moscow. So there could be other measures as well. That was hinted at today. Certainly Russia prides itself on being a superpower, and the President Vladimir Putin, as I said before, he has just won another term in power. He will not want to see his position weakened. He will not want to let slip any signs of weakness at all. He will want to show strength. So it is very likely that he will be taking an active role against these other countries. I think that's fairly clear. Your question is, what will this mean for other alliances around the world? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Perhaps Russia will be looking east to its other allies in China and elsewhere. We'll have to wait and see. Certainly Russia has a very central role in the Middle East and in other areas of the world which are not necessarily affected by the deterioration with relations around these other countries which have acted this week.
Lucy, just very quickly in wrapping up, the turnaround time with regards to other countries responding to the nerve agent attack and the response by the United Kingdom. This was a very quick turnaround. Why do you think this was prompted? Is it because it is Russia, which considers itself a superpower? Was this turnaround from other countries too quick? Or was there not enough time with regards to investigations to ensure that this was done by Russia?
Well, we don't know, because we don't know the details either of the British investigation or the evidence that Britain presented to other countries at that meeting with the European Union, in discussions with the US, Canada, Australia and the other countries which have acted this week. We simply don't know the details of that. But there is a pattern of behaviour from Russia which Britain has also been pointing to. They've said things publicly on the internet about other actions that Russia have taken in the past, in the hope of persuading these other countries to take action now. And certainly Britain itself, I think it's fair to say that Britain's leaders felt the pressure to act quickly, partly because of things that have happened in the past, when they've been accused of not acting quickly enough. So it's difficult for any outsiders to say whether this has happened too quickly or not. Certainly Russia's position is that this has happened too quickly, that Britain doesn't have evidence that Russia is behind it, and Russia denies all involvement in this attack on the former spy.
Lucy, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That was our correspondent Lucy Taylor joining us live from Moscow in Russia.